Some nights change everything. For Ashley Taylor, it was the night she fell, and the wrong man caught her. The crystal chandeliers of Lumiere cast dancing shadows across the white marble floors, each flicker of light reflecting the wealth that passed through its doors every evening. Ashley Taylor had worked at the restaurant for 2 years, long enough to know that Friday nights were always the hardest. The dining room buzzed with the low murmur of expensive conversations, the soft clink of wine glasses, and the subtle rustle of designer clothing. She pressed her hand against the small of her back, trying to ease the persistent ache that had settled there hours ago. 7 months pregnant and still on her feet for the dinner rush. Her manager, Thomas, had offered her lighter duties, but Ashley couldn't afford to take them. Lighter duties meant fewer tips, and fewer tips meant she couldn't make rent. So she smiled through the discomfort, balanced trays that seemed to grow heavier by the week, and counted down the hours until she could finally sit down. Table 12 needs their appetizers. Maria, another waitress, whispered as she passed. Maria was one of the few people at Lumiere who treated Ashley with genuine kindness, especially after everything that had happened 3 months ago when David disappeared. Ashley nodded, carefully lifting the tray laden with delicate plates of seared scallops and truffle risotto. The weight settled into her shoulders, and she took a breath before starting toward the stairs that led to the restaurant's exclusive second-floor dining area. Lumiere prided itself on its architecture, a restored 1920s building with a sweeping staircase that looked magnificent in photographs but was terribly impractical for a pregnant waitress. She'd made this climb 100 times tonight alone. Just a few more hours, she told herself. Just a few more hours, and then she could go home, take off these shoes that pinched her swollen feet, and try to sleep despite the baby's constant movements. The first few steps were fine. Ashley had developed a rhythm over the months. Step, pause, adjust the tray, step again. She kept her eyes focused ahead, watching the elegant couples seated at the candlelit tables on the upper level. Table 12 was occupied by a group of businessmen, the kind who ordered the most expensive items on the menu without looking at the prices. On the 7th step, something shifted. It started as a wave of dizziness, a sudden lightness in her head that made the chandelier above blur into a smear of golden light. Ashley blinked hard, trying to clear her vision, but the sensation only intensified. Her fingers tightened on the tray, knuckles going white with the effort to maintain her grip. Keep going, she told herself. Just a few more steps. But her body had other plans. The restaurant tilted sideways, or maybe she was the one tilting. Ashley couldn't tell anymore. Her foot missed the next step, or perhaps her knee simply gave out. The tray slipped from her fingers and she heard the crash of breaking porcelain as if from a great distance. Time seemed to stretch and slow, each second expanding into an eternity as she felt herself falling backward. The conversation stopped. The soft classical music that had been playing seemed to fade away. In that moment of suspension, Ashley's only thought was for the baby. Her hand moved instinctively to protect her belly, even as she braced for the impact that would surely come, but it didn't. Instead, she felt strong arms catch her, wrapping around her with surprising gentleness. The world steadied, and Ashley found herself cradled against someone's chest, the scent of expensive cologne mixing with the sharper smell of spilled truffle oil from the dropped appetizers. "I've got you," a voice said quietly, close to her ear. It was a man's voice, deep and controlled, with an edge of authority that made it clear he was used to being obeyed. "You're safe." Ashley's eyes fluttered open. The first thing she saw was the ceiling of Lumiere, the ornate molding coming back into focus. Then she tilted her head and found herself looking up at a face that made her breath catch for entirely different reasons. He was younger than she expected, maybe early 30s, with dark hair swept back from a face that could have belonged to an old Hollywood movie star. Strong jawline, sharp cheekbones, and eyes that were an unusual shade of gray-blue, like storm clouds over the ocean. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than Ashley made in 6 months, and there was a stillness about him that suggested power held carefully in check. But it wasn't his appearance that made Ashley's heart skip. It was the way he was looking at her, or rather, the way he was looking at her belly. His expression had gone completely blank, all color draining from his face as his gaze fixed on the curve of her pregnancy. His arms remained steady around her, but she felt a tension suddenly coil through his body. "Sir, I'm so sorry," Ashley started, trying to sit up, but the dizziness hadn't fully passed. "Don't move yet," he said, his voice still quiet but absolutely firm. "You nearly fell down a flight of stairs. Just stay still for a moment." Around them, chaos had erupted in the polite, controlled way that chaos erupts in expensive restaurants. Thomas, the manager, was rushing over, his face pale with concern and probably fear of a lawsuit. Other diners had risen from their seats, craning their necks to see what had happened. Maria had appeared at the bottom of the stairs, her hand pressed to her mouth. "Mr. Walker," Thomas said breathlessly, clearly knowing the man who had caught Ashley. "I'm terribly sorry for the disturbance. Miss Taylor, are you all right? Should we call an ambulance?" Mr. Walker. The name registered somewhere in Ashley's foggy mind, but she couldn't quite place why it seemed familiar. "I'm fine," Ashley managed, though her voice came out shakier than she intended. "Really? I just got a little dizzy. I can finish my shift." "You absolutely cannot finish your shift," Mr. Walker said, and there was something in his tone that made it clear this wasn't up for debate. He looked at Thomas. "She needs to see a doctor. Now." "I'll call 911, Thomas said, already reaching for his phone. "No need." Mr. Walker shifted his hold on Ashley slightly, preparing to help her to her feet. "I have a doctor on call. He can be here in 10 minutes. Ashley blinked up at him, confused. "I don't need a doctor. I just need to sit down for a minute. Please, I can't afford—" "You're not paying for anything," Mr. Walker interrupted gently but firmly. He finally looked directly into her eyes, and Ashley felt a strange jolt at the intensity she found there. "You're pregnant, and you just nearly fell down a flight of stairs. You're seeing a doctor, and that's final." There was something about the way he said it, not cruel or demanding, but with the absolute certainty of someone who always got what he wanted, that made Ashley's protests die in her throat. She nodded mutely. With careful precision, Mr. Walker helped her to her feet. Ashley's legs felt shaky, but his arm remained around her waist, supporting most of her weight. He guided her toward a private booth near the back of the restaurant, away from the staring diners who were already whispering among themselves. As they walked, or rather, as he walked and she leaned heavily against him, Ashley caught sight of the table where Mr. Walker had been sitting. 3 men sat there, all watching with varying expressions of surprise and concern. They were all dressed in expensive suits, all carrying themselves with the same aura of controlled power, but none of them moved to help. They simply watched their companion escort a pregnant waitress across the restaurant with the focus of people observing something very unexpected. Mr. Walker settled Ashley into the booth with surprising gentleness, then slid in across from her. Up close, in the soft candlelight, she could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the slight shadow of stubble along his jaw, despite what must have been a recent shave. He was studying her face with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "What's your name?" he asked. "Ashley. Ashley Taylor." She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly very aware of how disheveled she must look, her blonde hair escaping from its ponytail, her uniform stained with truffle oil, her makeup probably smudged. "I really am sorry about the disturbance, Mr. Walker, and about the food. I'll pay for the replacement dishes out of my tips." "No, you won't," he said immediately. "And stop apologizing. You didn't do anything wrong." He paused, his gaze dropping briefly to her belly before returning to her face. "How far along are you?" 7 months, Ashley said quietly, her hand moving instinctively to the curve of her stomach. The baby chose that moment to kick, a small flutter that always made her smile despite everything. 29 weeks. Something flickered across Mr. Walker's face, an emotion Ashley couldn't quite read. He opened his mouth as if to say something, then seemed to think better of it. Instead, he pulled out his phone and made a quick call. "Marcus, I need Dr. Chen at Lumiere." "Now." "Yes, it's urgent." "No, I'm fine. It's someone else, just get him here." He ended the call and looked back at Ashley. "The doctor will be here in less than 10 minutes. "I really can't afford a private doctor," Ashley said desperately. "My insurance through the restaurant is pretty basic, and—" "I said you're not paying for anything." Mr. Walker's tone left no room for argument. "Consider it an apology for the restaurant's unsafe working conditions. A pregnant woman shouldn't be carrying heavy trays up and down stairs." Ashley felt a flush of embarrassment creep up her neck. "I need the work. The tips on the 2nd floor are better, and I'm saving everything I can before the baby comes." "Where's the father?" The question came out more sharply than perhaps he intended, because Mr. Walker's expression immediately softened. "I'm sorry. That's none of my business." But something about the way he asked, or maybe it was the shock of the fall, or perhaps it was simply that Ashley was so tired of holding everything inside. Whatever the reason, she found herself answering honestly. "Gone," she said simply. "David. We were together for 2 years, and when I told him I was pregnant—" She shrugged. trying to make it seem like it didn't matter even though it still hurt like a fresh wound. He left about 3 months ago. Didn't even pack a bag, just disappeared one day while I was at work. His phone was disconnected, his social media accounts deleted. It was like he never existed. Mr. Walker's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He left you alone and pregnant. It wasn't a question, but Ashley nodded anyway. I tried to find him at first. Went to his workplace, but they said he'd quit without notice. Checked with his friends, but no one had heard from him. Eventually, I just had to accept that he wasn't coming back. She laughed, but it came out bitter. Guess I wasn't the future he wanted. That's not a reflection on you, Mr. Walker said quietly, and there was something in his voice that made Ashley look up in surprise. A man who abandons his responsibilities, who leaves someone vulnerable, that says everything about his character and nothing about yours. Before Ashley could respond, Maria appeared at the table carrying a glass of water and some crackers. Thomas said to bring these, she said, setting them down in front of Ashley. She gave Mr. Walker a nervous glance, then leaned close to whisper, "Are you okay? Should I stay?" "I'm fine," Ashley assured her, squeezing her friend's hand gratefully. "Mr. Walker is having a doctor come check on me." Maria's eyebrows rose almost to her hairline, but she simply nodded. "I'll be right over there if you need me," she said, pointing to a nearby station. The look she gave Mr. Walker was protective, almost threatening despite the difference in their positions, and Ashley loved her for it. After Maria left, an uncomfortable silence settled over the table. Ashley sipped her water, very aware of Mr. Walker's continued scrutiny. He seemed to be turning something over in his mind, weighing options she couldn't begin to guess at. "What did David do for work?" he asked finally. The question seemed random, but Ashley answered anyway. "He said he worked in finance, import-export business or something like that. He traveled a lot, always had cash, but was kind of secretive about the details." She paused, remembering. "I thought it was weird at the time, but he always had an explanation that made sense. Or maybe I just wanted to believe him." Mr. Walker's expression had gone very still again, that same blankness that had crossed his face when he first saw her pregnant belly. What was David's last name? Morrison. David Morrison. Why? But before Mr. Walker could answer, the restaurant's front door opened and a middle-aged Asian man carrying a medical bag hurried inside. He spotted Mr. Walker immediately and headed straight for their table, Thomas trailing nervously behind him. "Andrew," the doctor said, then seemed to catch himself. "Mr. Walker, what's the emergency?" So his first name was Andrew. Ashley filed that information away as Andrew. Mr. Walker gestured to her. "Dr. Chen, this is Ashley Taylor. She's 29 weeks pregnant and just experienced a dizzy spell that caused her to lose her balance on the stairs. I caught her before she fell, but I want you to check her and the baby to make sure everything is all right." Dr. Chen immediately shifted into professional mode, setting his bag down and pulling out a stethoscope. "Ms. Taylor, I'm Dr. James Chen. I'm going to do a quick examination if that's all right with you. Can you tell me about your symptoms?" For the next 15 minutes, Dr. Chen asked questions, checked her blood pressure, listened to the baby's heartbeat with a portable fetal monitor, and conducted a thorough examination, as much as was possible, in a restaurant booth. Ashley answered everything honestly. Yes, she'd been on her feet for 6 hours straight. No, she hadn't eaten much today because she got nauseous when the restaurant got too warm. Yes, she'd been feeling more tired than usual, but she thought that was normal for pregnancy. Dr. Chen's expression grew increasingly concerned as the examination progressed. Finally, he sat back and fixed Ashley with a serious look. "Ms. Taylor, your blood pressure is elevated. You're showing signs of dehydration and exhaustion, and frankly, you're pushing yourself too hard. What you experienced tonight wasn't just a simple dizzy spell. Your body is telling you it can't sustain this level of physical stress, especially in your 3rd trimester." He paused. "You need to reduce your hours significantly, increase your rest, and improve your nutrition. Otherwise, you're risking your health and your baby's health." Ashley felt tears prick at her eyes. "I can't reduce my hours, I need the money." "Then you need to find another way," Dr. Chen said gently but firmly. "Because if you continue like this, you're going to end up in the hospital, possibly on bed rest, and then you won't be working at all." The tears spilled over. Ashley quickly wiped them away, embarrassed to be crying in front of these strangers. But they kept coming. All the stress of the past 3 months, the abandonment, the financial worry, the loneliness, the fear of facing motherhood alone, seemed to crash down on her at once. "I don't have another way," she whispered. "I'm completely alone. No family, No support system. David took what little savings I had in our joint account when he left. I've been living paycheck to paycheck, trying to save enough for when I have to take maternity leave, but I'm barely making it as it is. If I cut my hours, she couldn't finish the sentence. If she cut her hours, she'd lose her apartment. She'd have nowhere to go when the baby came. Dr. Chen looked at Andrew with an expression Ashley couldn't quite read, something between concern and a question. Andrew's jaw was tight, his hands clasped on the table in front of him. He seemed to be engaged in some internal debate, his gray-blue eyes stormy and distant. Finally, he seemed to come to a decision. He looked at Dr. Chen and said, "Give us a moment, please." Dr. Chen nodded, packed up his equipment, and moved to speak with Thomas, leaving Ashley alone with Andrew once more. The restaurant had mostly returned to normal, though she could still feel curious glances directed their way. "Ashley," Andrew said quietly, leaning forward, "I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. It's important." She nodded, wiping at her eyes. "Did David ever talk about his business associates? Mention any names, any places he traveled to regularly?" The question was strange, unexpected, but something in Andrew's intensity made Ashley think carefully. He went to New Jersey a lot, Newark, I think, and he mentioned someone named Tony once or twice, but he never wanted to talk about work when he was home. She paused. "Why are you asking me this?" Andrew was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "I think I might know you're David Morrison, or at least I know of someone by that name who worked in import-export." Ashley's heart skipped. "You know David? Do you know where he is?" "I didn't say I know where he is," Andrew corrected gently. "Just that the name is familiar. The import-export business can be complicated, and sometimes people in that business disappear when things get complicated." There was something he wasn't saying, something lurking beneath his careful words. Ashley had the sudden, unsettling feeling that she'd been living with a stranger, that David had been hiding things far more serious than just a secretive work life. "What kind of complications?" she asked, though part of her wasn't sure she wanted to know. Andrew studied her face for a long moment, seeming to measure how much to tell her. Finally, he said, "The kind that make a man run away and never look back. The kind that put the people around him in difficult positions." A chill ran down Ashley's spine. "Are you saying David was involved in something illegal?" "I'm saying that the David Morrison I'm thinking of made some choices that created problems. And if he's the same person..." Andrew trailed off, then seemed to change direction. "You said he took money from your joint account when he left?" Ashley nodded. "About $3,000. It was everything I had saved." Something dark flickered across Andrew's face. "Of course he did." He was quiet for another moment, then seemed to come to another decision. "Ashley, I'm going to help you." "What?" "No, I couldn't possibly." "You're not asking. I'm offering." Andrew's tone was firm but not unkind. "You need to reduce your work hours for your health and your baby's health. That means you need financial support. I'm in a position to provide that support, so I will." Ashley shook her head, overwhelmed. "I don't understand. Why would you help me? You don't even know me." "Let's just say that I believe in taking responsibility," Andrew said carefully. "And I believe that if David Morrison is who I think he is, then in a way, his problems are connected to my world, which means you shouldn't have to suffer for his choices." It was cryptic, confusing, but Ashley was too tired and too overwhelmed to push for clarity. "I can't just take money from you. That's not... I don't even know you." "Then get to know me," Andrew said simply. "Let me help you, and in return maybe you can tell me more about David. Help me understand the full picture of what happened." He paused. "I have resources, Ashley. I can make sure you're safe, that you're taken care of until the baby comes. No strings attached, just help." It should have sounded too good to be true. It should have raised every red flag. But something in Andrew's eyes and the genuine concern that seemed to radiate from him made Ashley want to trust him, or maybe she was just desperate enough to take the lifeline being offered. "I don't know," she whispered. "Think about it," Andrew said. "Dr. Chen is going to give you some information about prenatal care and nutrition. I'm going to have Thomas adjust your schedule starting tomorrow, lighter duties, shorter shifts, and I'm going to give you my card." He pulled out a business card from his wallet and slid it across the table. "If you need anything or if you want to talk more about David and what might have happened, call me." Ashley picked up the card with trembling fingers. It was simple, elegant. Andrew Walker and a phone number. No company name, no title, just a name and a way to reach him. "I should get back to work," she said, though the thought of standing up seemed overwhelming. "You should go home," Andrew corrected. "Doctor, Chen is going to insist on it anyway, and Thomas isn't going to argue with him. Let someone call you a car. I take the subway." "Not tonight, you don't." Andrew was already pulling out his phone again. "I'm having my driver take you home. He'll wait to make sure you get inside safely." "This is too much," Ashley protested weakly. "It's nothing," Andrew said, and the way he said it made her believe that to him, it truly was nothing. The cost of a car service, a private doctor, helping a struggling waitress. These were minor considerations to someone like him. Before she could argue further, Dr. Chen returned with Thomas. "Ms. Taylor, I'm prescribing rest for the remainder of tonight. I'll send some prenatal vitamins and dietary guidelines to your pharmacy. Mr. Walker has my information if you have any concerns before your next OB appointment." He smiled kindly. "Take care of yourself and that baby." Thomas, looking relieved that there wouldn't be a lawsuit, quickly agreed that Ashley should go home and that her schedule would be adjusted going forward. "Just focus on feeling better," he said. "Maria can cover your remaining tables." Everything happened quickly after that. Andrew's driver, a quiet, professional man named Marcus, arrived and escorted Ashley to a sleek black car waiting outside. Andrew walked her to the door, his hand lightly touching her elbow in a gesture that was both protective and strangely intimate. "Remember," he said as Marcus opened the car door for her, "call if you need anything." "And Ashley?" He waited until she met his eyes. "Whatever David was involved in, whatever happened, you're not alone anymore." Ashley settled into the car, her mind spinning with everything that had happened. As Marcus pulled away from the curb, she looked back to see Andrew standing on the sidewalk, watching the car disappear into the New York traffic. Even from a distance, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands were shoved deep into his pockets. She didn't understand what had just happened, didn't understand why a wealthy, powerful man would take such an interest in a struggling waitress, didn't understand what David had been involved in, or how it connected to Andrew Walker. But as she looked down at the business card clutched in her hand, Ashley felt something she hadn't felt in 3 months. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, things were going to be okay. She had no idea how wrong she was. She had no idea that Andrew Walker wasn't just any wealthy businessman. She had no idea that the world she'd just stepped into was far more dangerous than she could imagine. And she had no idea that back at the restaurant, Andrew was making a phone call that would change everything. "Marcus," Andrew said into his phone, his voice cold and controlled in a way it hadn't been with Ashley. "I need you to run a full background check on Ashley Taylor, and I need you to find David Morrison. I don't care where he's hiding or who he's hiding with. Find him." He paused, listening to Marcus's response, his eyes still fixed on the spot where the car had disappeared. "Because David Morrison didn't just steal money from the organization," Andrew said quietly, his jaw tight. "He stole a lot more than that. And if the timing is right," he trailed off, his gaze distant and cold. "Just find him, and make sure Ashley Taylor is protected. I want someone watching her apartment, tracking her movements. She doesn't know it yet, but she just became the most valuable person in this entire city." He ended the call and stood there for a long moment, the cool night air washing over him. Inside the restaurant, his associates were waiting, undoubtedly full of questions about why he'd spent the last half hour with a pregnant waitress. But Andrew didn't care about their questions. All he cared about was the terrible, impossible possibility that had struck him the moment he'd seen Ashley's pregnant belly, heard the name David Morrison, calculated the timing. If he was right, and he was almost certain he was right, then everything was about to get infinitely more complicated, because the baby Ashley Taylor was carrying might not just be David Morrison's child. It might be the key to everything. When Ashley opened her eyes, she wasn't in a hospital, and the man watching her wasn't a doctor. Ashley woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows. For a moment she lay perfectly still, her mind struggling to piece together where she was. This wasn't her cramped studio apartment with its water-stained ceiling and the broken blind that never quite closed. The bed beneath her was impossibly soft. The sheets had a thread count she couldn't even imagine affording, and the room smelled faintly of lavender instead of the usual city exhaust that filtered through her ancient air conditioner. Then the memories came flooding back. The fall at Lumiere, Andrew Walker's strong arms catching her, the doctor's examination, the black car ride home. But this wasn't home. Ashley sat up quickly, too quickly. A wave of dizziness made her pause, one hand pressed to her forehead, the other instinctively protecting her belly. The baby kicked, a reassuring flutter that told her everything was okay despite the confusion. "Easy," a voice said from across the room. "Dr. Chen said you need to move slowly." Ashley's head snapped toward the sound. Andrew Walker sat in an armchair by the window, dressed more casually than last night in dark jeans and a gray sweater that somehow made his eyes look even more striking. He held a cup of coffee, and despite the relaxed posture, there was a tension in his shoulders that suggested he'd been there for a while. "Where am I?" Ashley demanded, pulling the sheets up to her chin even though she was still fully dressed in the clothes she'd worn to work. "What happened?" "I remember Marcus driving me home, and I went inside my apartment, and then..." The memory faded into darkness. "You collapsed in your apartment hallway," Andrew said calmly, setting down his coffee. "The building superintendent found you about 20 minutes after Marcus dropped you off. You'd apparently stopped to check your mailbox and lost consciousness. Marcus had stayed nearby just to make sure you got inside safely, and he saw the commotion. He brought you here. Here being? My home, the penthouse level." Andrew gestured vaguely at the expansive room. "I had Dr. Chen examine you again when you arrived. You've been asleep for about 12 hours. Ashley's eyes widened. 12 hours? But work? "I have a shift today. Thomas knows you're not coming in. I spoke with him this morning." Andrew's tone left no room for argument. "Dr. Chen was very clear, Ashley. You're severely exhausted and malnourished. Your blood pressure is concerning. You need rest, proper meals, and monitoring, not 12-hour shifts carrying heavy trays." The reality of her situation crashed over Ashley like a wave. She was in a stranger's home, had lost an entire night, and was apparently too sick to work. "I need to leave," she said, swinging her legs off the bed. "I appreciate your help, but I can't just stay here. I don't even know you." "Then let me remedy that." Andrew stood up smoothly. "I'm Andrew Walker. I'm 32 years old. I run several businesses in the city, legitimate ones," he added with a slight emphasis that made Ashley wonder what illegitimate businesses he might also be involved in. "I have no family to speak of. I enjoy chess, I hate mushrooms, and I've been told I can be somewhat controlling when it comes to making sure people are safe." Despite everything, Ashley felt the corner of her mouth twitch. Somewhat controlling? Admittedly an understatement. There was a glimmer of humor in his eyes, quickly suppressed. "Now you, tell me about Ashley Taylor." She should have refused. Should have demanded he call her a car immediately. Instead, she found herself answering, "I'm 24. I've been working at Lumiere for 2 years. I moved to New York from Ohio when I was 19 because I thought I wanted to be an actress." She laughed softly at her younger self's naivety. "That didn't work out. I have no family either. My parents died in a car accident when I was 17 and I was an only child. I like old movies, I'm terrible at cooking, and I'm apparently very bad at choosing reliable partners." The humor faded from Andrew's expression. "What you experienced with David Morrison, that's not a reflection of your judgment. People like him are skilled at deception." "People like him," Ashley repeated slowly. "You keep saying things like that. Last night you said you might know him, that he was involved in complications. What does that mean, Andrew? What was David really doing?" Andrew was quiet for a long moment, seeming to weigh his words carefully. Finally, he moved to sit on the edge of the bed, maintaining a respectful distance but close enough that Ashley could see the conflict playing out across his features. "Before I answer that, I need to know something," he said. "And I need you to be completely honest with me, even if the truth is difficult. Can you do that?" Ashley's heart began to beat faster. "I'll try. When did you and David start dating?" The question seemed innocuous, but something in Andrew's intensity suggested otherwise. "About 2 years and 3 months ago. We met at a coffee shop near the restaurant. He was charming, attentive, seemed genuinely interested in me. The memories felt tainted now, like looking at photographs that had been doctored." "Why? And when did you become pregnant?" Ashley felt her cheeks flush. "That's pretty personal." "I know, but it's important. Please." She took a breath. "I found out about 7.5 months ago, so I conceived around 8 months ago, give or take. The baby is due in about 11 weeks. Andrew's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He pulled out his phone, scrolled through something, then showed her the screen. "Is this David Morrison?" Ashley looked at the photo and felt her stomach drop. It was David, or at least, it looked like David, but in this picture, he was different. His hair was darker, styled differently. He wore an expensive suit and stood next to several other men in what looked like some kind of formal gathering, but it was his expression that struck her most. Cold, calculating, Nothing like the warm, charming man she'd fallen in love with. "That's him," she whispered. "But he looks different. Where did you get this photo?" "It was taken about a year ago at a business meeting," Andrew said carefully. "Ashley, David Morrison, or whatever his real name is, wasn't an import-export. At least not the legal kind." The room seemed to tilt. "What are you saying?" Andrew set his phone aside and looked directly at her. "I'm saying that David Morrison worked for an organization involved in moving goods that couldn't be transported through legal channels. Money laundering, high-end theft, that sort of thing. Nothing." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Nothing that hurt people directly, but definitely not legal." Ashley felt like she couldn't breathe. "David was a criminal." "Yes. And you know this because I'm in the same business," Andrew said quietly. "Different organization, different territory, but the same world. That's how I recognized his name last night. About 3 months ago, David Morrison stole a significant amount of money from his employers and disappeared. We'd heard rumors he'd cleaned out bank accounts and run, but we didn't know about you. The implications crashed over Ashley in waves. David hadn't just abandoned her. He'd been running from criminals. And now she was sitting in the home of another criminal, having trusted him with her safety. "I need to leave," Ashley said again, but her voice came out shakier this time. "Right now." "Ashley, wait." "No." She stood up, fighting through the dizziness. "You're telling me that David was a criminal, that you're a criminal, and that I've somehow ended up in the middle of all this. I need to get out of here. I need to go somewhere safe." "You are somewhere safe," Andrew said, standing as well but maintaining his distance. "That's why I brought you here. Ashley, please listen to me. When David stole that money and disappeared, he made himself a target. The people he stole from are looking for him, and if they find out about you, about the baby, they'll come after me." Ashley finished, feeling sick. "To use me as leverage to find him." "Yes." She sank back down onto the bed, her legs unable to support her anymore. "This can't be happening. This can't be real." Andrew moved closer, slowly, like approaching a frightened animal. "I know this is overwhelming. I know you have no reason to trust me, but I'm asking you to anyway, at least for now. Let me protect you until we can figure this out." "Figure what out?" "David's gone. I don't know where he is. I can't help anyone find him." "I know that," Andrew said gently. "But they might not believe you, or they might think you know more than you do." He paused. "Ashley, there's something else. Something I need to tell you, but I need you to stay calm." The way he said it made Ashley's blood run cold. "What?" Andrew pulled his phone back out and pulled up what looked like a financial document. "This is a record of the money David stole. The transaction was made exactly 8 months and 2 weeks ago, the same time you became pregnant." Ashley stared at the date on the screen, her mind working to understand what he was suggesting. "I don't understand. What does the timing matter?" "David had been planning to run for at least a month before he actually did it," Andrew explained carefully. "Which means he knew he was leaving. He knew he was about to make himself a target. He knew his life was about to become very complicated. So?" Ashley felt tears burning in her eyes. "So he got me pregnant and then left anyway? That just makes him even more of a coward." "Or," Andrew said quietly, meeting her eyes, "he got you pregnant deliberately, as insurance." The words hung in the air between them. Ashley felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. "What?" "Think about it, Ashley. A man about to run away with stolen money, about to make powerful enemies. He leaves behind a pregnant girlfriend. If anyone came looking for him, they'd find you. They'd see you're pregnant. They'd see you as potential leverage." Andrew's expression was pained. "I think David deliberately got you pregnant so that you'd be his insurance policy, so that if things went wrong, he'd have something to bargain with." "No." Ashley shook her head violently. "No, that's insane. People don't do that. David wouldn't. David Morrison stole money from dangerous people and left you alone and pregnant with nothing," Andrew said, his voice harsh now. "You said yourself he took your savings." "He disconnected his phone, deleted his social media, vanished completely. Does that sound like a man who cared about you? Or does it sound like a man who used you?" Ashley couldn't breathe. The tears were flowing freely now, and with them came a rage she didn't know she possessed. All those months of thinking she wasn't good enough, that David had left because she'd disappointed him somehow, that the pregnancy had scared him away, and the truth might be even worse. He might have planned it all, might have deliberately created a situation where she'd be vulnerable, alone, carrying his child as some twisted form of protection for himself. "I'm going to be sick," she whispered. Andrew immediately grabbed a nearby wastebasket and brought it to her, one hand gently holding back her hair as Ashley retched. Nothing came up. Her stomach was empty, but the heaving continued until she was gasping for air, tears and anger and betrayal pouring out of her. When she finally stopped, Andrew handed her a tissue and a bottle of water that had appeared from somewhere. His touch was gentle, almost tender, as he helped her wipe her face. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I know that was harsh, but you needed to know the truth." "Why?" Ashley looked up at him with red, swollen eyes. "Why do I need to know? Why does it matter if he used me deliberately or if he was just a coward? The result is the same. I'm alone and pregnant and apparently in danger from criminals looking for a man I never really knew." "It matters because you need to understand what you're dealing with," Andrew said. "And because—" He hesitated, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked uncertain. "Ashley, there's a possibility, just a possibility, that David's plan was even more complicated than I thought." "How could it possibly be more complicated?" Andrew sat down beside her on the bed, careful to maintain some space between them. "The organization David worked for, they have strict rules. One of those rules is that family is protected, children especially. Even in this world, there are lines that don't get crossed, codes that get followed." Ashley felt a chill run down her spine. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that if David got you pregnant deliberately, knowing he was about to steal money and run, he might have done it not just as leverage but as protection, for himself, but also—" Andrew paused, his gray-blue eyes searching hers. "Also for the money. Because if he has a child out there, certain people won't touch that money, won't go after him as aggressively. It's complicated, but in this world, children change the equation. So I'm not just leverage," Ashley said slowly, her voice hollow. "I'm a shield. The baby is a shield." "Possibly." They sat in silence for a long moment. Ashley's hand moved to her belly, feeling the small movements of the life growing inside her. This baby that she'd worried about, cried over, tried so hard to prepare for despite having nothing. This baby might have been created for all the wrong reasons. Not out of love, not even out of carelessness, but as part of a calculated plan by a man she'd never really known. "I want to find him," she said suddenly, looking at Andrew. "David. I want to look him in the eye and ask him if it's true. If he really did this deliberately." "That's not a good idea." "I don't care." Ashley's voice was steel now, all the fear and vulnerability burned away by a cold, hard anger. "You said you have resources. You said you can find people. Find David Morrison. I need to know the truth." Andrew studied her face for a long moment. "If we find him, and if what I suspect is true, he's not going to admit it. Men like David don't confess. They lie. They manipulate. They say whatever they need to say to survive. Then I'll know by what he doesn't say," Ashley said. "Please, Andrew. You said you wanted to help me. This is how you can help. Find David Morrison and give me the chance to confront him. And if finding him puts you in more danger?" "I'm already in danger, aren't I?" Ashley met his eyes steadily. "You said people are looking for him, that they might come after me. So the danger is already here. At least if we find him first, maybe we can control the situation. Maybe we can—" She paused, a new thought occurring to her. "Maybe we can trade him." Andrew's eyebrows rose. "Trade him? You said the people he stole from are looking for him. What if we find him and give him back, in exchange for leaving me alone, for keeping me and the baby safe?" Ashley's mind was working fast now, fueled by anger and desperation. "Would that work? Is that something that could be arranged?" A slow, almost reluctant smile crossed Andrew's face. "You're thinking like someone from my world now." "I'm thinking like a mother who needs to protect her child," Ashley corrected. "And if that means making deals with criminals, then that's what I'll do." Andrew was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "It could work," he admitted. "If we can find David, and if we approach the right people with the right offer, we might be able to broker a deal that keeps you safe. But Ashley, you need to understand. Once you make a deal in this world, you're part of it. You can't just walk away and pretend it never happened. I can't walk away and pretend any of this never happened," Ashley said. "My entire life has been built on a lie. The man I loved, the father of my baby, the future I thought I had, all of it was fake. So yes, let's make a deal. Let's find David and trade him for my safety. Because right now that's the only future I can see that doesn't end with me looking over my shoulder for the rest of my life." Andrew studied her for another long moment, and Ashley had the sense he was reassessing her, seeing her differently than he had before. "All right," he said finally. "I'll find David Morrison. I have people working on it already, but there are conditions. Of course there are. You stay here in this penthouse where I can protect you. You don't go back to your apartment. I'll have your belongings brought here. You don't go to work. I'll handle your finances until this is resolved. And you trust me. Andrew's gaze was intense. That's the most important condition, Ashley. You have to trust that I have your best interests at heart, even when my methods seem questionable. Ashley wanted to refuse, wanted to insist she could take care of herself, but she was tired, pregnant, broke, and apparently being hunted by criminals because of a man who'd used her as part of some twisted plan. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. I'll stay, she said. I'll trust you, but I have a condition too. Name it. Honesty, complete honesty. No more carefully worded half-truths or vague references to complications. If I'm going to be part of this world even temporarily, I need to know exactly what I'm dealing with. Andrew extended his hand. Deal. Ashley shook it, feeling the warmth and strength of his grip. For better or worse, she'd just agreed to enter a world she didn't understand, trusting a man she barely knew, all in pursuit of another man who'd betrayed her in ways she was still processing. But as Andrew helped her to her feet and guided her toward the penthouse's kitchen, where he insisted she needed to eat a proper meal, Ashley felt something she hadn't felt in months. Determination. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She wasn't just a pregnant waitress who'd been abandoned and deceived. She was someone who was going to fight back. Andrew, she said, as he started pulling ingredients from an industrial-sized refrigerator. Last night in the restaurant, you went pale when you saw I was pregnant. Why? What were you thinking? He paused, his back to her, his shoulders tense. When he turned around, his expression was carefully neutral, but his eyes gave him away. There was something there, guilt, concern, or maybe something else entirely. I was thinking, he said slowly, that the timing was very suspicious. That David Morrison disappeared exactly when you would have been getting far enough along that terminating the pregnancy would have been difficult, that he planned it that way, to make sure his insurance policy couldn't be easily undone. It was a good answer, a logical answer, but Ashley had the distinct feeling it wasn't the complete answer. There was something else, something Andrew wasn't telling her even as he'd promised honesty. But before she could press him, her phone, which someone had apparently retrieved from her apartment and placed on the kitchen counter, buzzed with an incoming text. Ashley picked it up and felt her blood run cold. The message was from an unknown number. We know about the baby. We know you're with Walker. Time to come home, Ashley. David wants to talk. She showed the phone to Andrew with trembling hands. His expression went from concern to furious in an instant, and he immediately pulled out his own phone. Marcus, he barked into it. We've got a problem. Someone made contact with Ashley. I need a full security sweep of this building and a trace on this number now. He paused, listening. I don't care what it takes. And get me a meeting with the Castellano family. Tonight. He ended the call and looked at Ashley, his gray-blue eyes now cold and calculating, the expression of a man who'd just gone from protector to warrior. It seems we're out of time, he said quietly. David knows where you are, which means others know too. And if David wants to talk, he paused, his jaw tight, then we're going to give him exactly what he wants. But on our terms. Ashley's hand moved protectively to her belly. What does that mean? Andrew's smile was sharp and dangerous. It means we're going to set a trap, and David Morrison is going to walk right into it. Trust is earned, not given. But when danger comes knocking, sometimes you have no choice. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of activity that left Ashley feeling like she'd stepped into a completely different reality. Andrew's penthouse transformed into something resembling a command center. Men in dark suits came and went at all hours, speaking in low voices about perimeter security and digital footprints and other terms Ashley didn't fully understand. Her phone had been taken away, for her own safety, Andrew explained, and replaced with a new one that had exactly 3 contacts: Andrew, Marcus, and Dr. Chen. Ashley spent most of her time in the guest room or the expansive living area, watching the city stretch out below through floor-to-ceiling windows. New York looked different from up here, cleaner, more organized, as if the chaos of street level couldn't quite reach this height. Sometimes she caught herself wondering if that's how Andrew saw the world, from a distance, manageable, controllable. She was standing at those windows on the evening of the second day when Andrew found her, 2 cups of tea in his hands. He'd been largely absent since the text message arrived, locked in his office or out at meetings she wasn't privy to, but now he looked tired, the lines around his eyes more pronounced. Chamomile, he said, offering her one of the cups. Dr. Chen said it's safe for pregnancy and might help you sleep. Ashley accepted it gratefully. She hadn't been sleeping well. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw David's face, heard his lies, wondered how she could have been so blind. Thank you. Any news? Andrew moved to stand beside her at the window, his reflection ghostly in the glass. Some. We traced the phone number that texted you. It was a burner phone, activated just hours before the message was sent and deactivated immediately after. Whoever sent it knows how to cover their tracks. But it was David? Ashley's grip tightened on her cup. The message said David wants to talk. The message said that, yes. But we don't know if David actually sent it, or if someone else is using his name. Andrew took a sip of his own tea. That's the problem with this world, Ashley. Nothing is ever quite what it seems. Everyone has an angle, everyone's playing a game. Is that what you're doing? The question came out before Ashley could stop it. Playing a game? Andrew turned to look at her directly, and in the fading evening light, his eyes looked more gray than blue. I'm protecting you. That's not a game to me. But you're getting something out of this too, aren't you? Ashley pressed. She'd been thinking about this for 2 days, trying to understand why a man like Andrew Walker would invest so much time and resources into helping a pregnant waitress. You said David's organization has strict rules. You're from a different organization, a rival one maybe. So if you find David, if you're the one who brings him in or makes a deal, that gives you leverage, power, respect. A slow smile crossed Andrew's face. You're learning fast. I'm a quick study when my life depends on it. Ashley set her tea down on a nearby table. So let's be honest with each other like we agreed. You're helping me and I'm grateful, but you're also helping yourself, which is fine. I understand how this works now, but I need to know exactly where I stand. Am I just a piece on your chessboard? Andrew was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than she'd heard before. When I first saw you fall on those stairs, all I saw was a pregnant woman in danger. When I learned your connection to David Morrison, yes, I saw an opportunity. A way to find a man who'd stolen from people in my world. A way to potentially broker a deal that would benefit my position. He paused, turning to face her fully. But somewhere between that first night and now, something changed. You stopped being just an opportunity and started being someone I actually care about protecting. Not because of what you can do for me, but because, he trailed off, seeming to struggle with the words, because I've watched you process everything that's happened, the betrayal, the lies, the danger, and instead of breaking down, you've gotten stronger. You've asked the hard questions. You've made difficult choices, and I respect that. Ashley felt her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. I don't feel strong. I feel terrified most of the time. Courage isn't the absence of fear, Andrew said. It's acting despite it. And that's what you've been doing. He reached out and, after a moment's hesitation, gently squeezed her shoulder. The touch was brief, almost brotherly, but Ashley felt the warmth of it long after he'd pulled away. So yes, you're on my chessboard, but you're not just a piece. You're a player now, and players get a say in how the game is played. Before Ashley could respond, the penthouse's elevator chimed. Marcus emerged, his expression grave, followed by a woman Ashley hadn't seen before. She was striking, probably in her late 40s, with jet black hair pulled into an elegant chignon, wearing a tailored burgundy suit that screamed power and money. Andrew, the woman said, her voice carrying a slight Italian accent. We need to talk. Privately. Andrew's posture shifted almost imperceptibly, becoming more formal. Isabella, thank you for coming. He glanced at Ashley. This is Ashley Taylor. Ashley, this is Isabella Castellano. She's a business associate. The way he said business associate made it clear this was someone important. Isabella's dark eyes swept over Ashley with an assessing gaze that felt invasive, lingering on her pregnant belly before returning to her face. So you're the girl everyone's talking about, Isabella said. It wasn't exactly friendly, but it wasn't hostile either, more like a statement of fact. The one carrying David Morrison's child. That's me, Ashley said, lifting her chin slightly. She refused to be intimidated, even though everything about Isabella Castellano screamed danger wrapped in expensive fabric. Interesting. Isabella turned back to Andrew. We should speak in your office. What I have to say concerns her, but she shouldn't hear it directly, not yet. Andrew looked torn, but finally nodded. Ashley, would you mind waiting here? I'll fill you in on everything afterward, I promise. Ashley wanted to protest. She'd just been told she was a player, not a piece, so why was she being excluded? But something in Andrew's expression told her this wasn't the time to push. Fine, but I'm holding you to that promise. I wouldn't expect anything less. Andrew's lips quirked in a small smile before he and Isabella disappeared into his office, Marcus following behind and closing the door firmly. Ashley stood alone in the living room, her tea forgotten, staring at that closed door. She could hear the murmur of voices but couldn't make out words. Frustration bubbled up inside her. This was her life, her baby, her danger they were discussing in there, and she was being shut out like a child sent to bed while the adults talked. She was about to march over and demand to be included when her new phone buzzed. Ashley pulled it out, expecting maybe a message from Dr. Chen about her upcoming appointment. Instead, she found herself staring at a text from an unknown number, again. But this message was different from the last one. It contained a video file. Ashley's hands trembled as she pressed play. The video quality was poor, clearly shot on a phone in low light, but the face that filled the screen was unmistakable. David Morrison. He looked terrible. His hair was unkempt, his face gaunt, with dark circles under his eyes that suggested he hadn't slept properly in weeks. He was in what looked like a cheap motel room, the kind with stained wallpaper and a bed that sagged in the middle. Ashley, David's recorded voice said, and hearing it again after 3 months felt like a punch to the stomach. I know you're probably watching this with Andrew Walker. I know he's told you things about me, some of them true, some of them, well, probably also true if I'm being honest. He laughed, but it sounded hollow, desperate. I messed up, Ash. I messed up so badly, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry I left you, sorry I took your money, sorry for everything. But you have to understand, I didn't have a choice. The people I was working for, the things they wanted me to do. He shook his head. I couldn't do it anymore. So I took the money and I ran, and I thought if I just disappeared, they'd eventually forget about me and you'd be safe. Ashley felt tears burning in her eyes, but she forced herself to keep watching. But they didn't forget, David continued. They've been hunting me for 3 months, and now they know about you, about the baby. His voice cracked. Ashley, I swear I didn't mean for this to happen. I didn't mean for you to get caught up in all of this. The baby. He stopped, his expression twisting with something that looked like genuine pain. The timing wasn't planned. I know Walker probably told you I got you pregnant deliberately as some kind of insurance, but that's not true. It was an accident, a beautiful accident, and when I found out I was happy. I was going to leave the business, go legitimate, be a real father. He wiped his face with his hand, and Ashley could see he was crying. But then everything went wrong. My bosses found out I was planning to leave. They pressured me to do one more job, a big one, something that would have hurt innocent people. I couldn't do it. So I took the money they'd set aside for the job and I ran. I thought if I took enough, they'd be too busy trying to recover their losses to come after you. I thought the baby would protect you. They have rules about pregnant women, about children. I thought you'd be safe. The video showed David leaning closer to the camera, his eyes red and desperate. But I was wrong. They don't care about rules anymore, not when this much money is involved. And now Walker has you, and I don't know if that's better or worse. Because Ashley, you need to understand something about Andrew Walker. He's not the good guy in this story. He's just as deep in this world as I was, maybe deeper. And whatever he's told you, whatever promises he's made, he's using you too. Maybe not the same way I did, but he's using you. Ashley felt her chest tighten. Was David telling the truth? Or was this just more manipulation? There's a way out, David said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. For all of us. But I need you to trust me one more time. I need you to meet me. Tomorrow night at the place where we had our first date. You remember? Come alone. Don't tell Walker, don't bring anyone. Just you and me, and I'll explain everything. I'll tell you the whole truth, the real truth, and then you can decide what you want to do. You can go back to Walker if you want, or you can come with me, and I'll make sure you and the baby are safe. I promise, Ashley. I promise I'll make this right. The video ended abruptly, leaving Ashley staring at the frozen image of David's tear-stained face. Her mind raced. David said the pregnancy wasn't planned, that he'd been happy about it. But was that true? Or was he lying even now, trying to manipulate her into meeting him alone? And what about his warnings about Andrew? Were those based in truth or just attempts to drive a wedge between her and the one person who'd actually helped her? She looked at the closed office door. She should show this video to Andrew immediately. That's what she'd been told to do, report any contact from David. But something held her back. David had said to come alone, to not tell Walker. And while part of Ashley knew that was exactly what a manipulator would say, Another part, the part that had loved David, that had believed in their future together, wanted to hear his full explanation, wanted to look him in the eye and determine for herself if there was any truth in what he'd said. The office door opened and Andrew emerged with Isabella and Marcus. All three wore expressions of grim satisfaction, like people who'd just closed a difficult business deal. "Ashley," Andrew called, gesturing for her to join them. "We have a development. Isabella has information about David's location." Ashley quickly locked her phone and slipped it into her pocket, hoping her face didn't betray the turmoil inside. She walked over to join them, her mind spinning with conflicting loyalties and impossible choices. "What kind of information?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Isabella's dark eyes fixed on her with unnerving intensity. "My sources indicate that David Morrison has been hiding in New Jersey, moving between cheap motels to avoid detection. But he's getting desperate. His money is running out, and he knows we're closing in, which means he's going to make a move soon." "What kind of move?" Ashley's hand moved unconsciously to her belly. "He's going to try to contact you," Andrew said. "Probably ask for a meeting, try to manipulate you into helping him. We need to be ready for that. We need to use it." Ashley felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff. "Use it how?" "You meet him," Isabella said bluntly. "But we're there too, hidden, waiting. He comes out of hiding to see you. We grab him, and this whole situation gets resolved. You get your safety, we get justice, everyone wins except David Morrison. That's the plan." Ashley heard her voice come out sharper than intended. "I'm bait? You're the solution," Andrew corrected gently. "David will only come out for you. He won't meet with me or with Isabella. But you're carrying his child. He'll trust you, or at least he'll want to. So, yes, you'd be putting yourself in a vulnerable position, but we'd be right there. You'd never be in real danger." Ashley looked between the three of them, Andrew with his concerned but determined expression, Isabella with her cold calculation, Marcus standing silent and watchful. They all seemed so certain this was the right plan, the only plan, and maybe it was. Maybe this was how things worked in their world, how problems got solved. But Ashley couldn't shake the image of David's desperate, tear-stained face from the video. Couldn't stop hearing his claim that the pregnancy wasn't planned, that Andrew was using her too. "I need to think about it," she said finally. Isabella's eyebrows rose. "There's nothing to think about. Every hour we wait is an hour David Morrison stays in hiding. An hour the people looking for him get more frustrated and potentially more willing to bend their rules about harming pregnant women." "Isabella," Andrew's voice carried a warning. "Ashley's right. She needs time to process this. We're asking her to put herself in a difficult position. We're asking her to solve her own problem," Isabella countered. "Or would she prefer to spend the next several months hiding in your penthouse waiting for David to make a move on his own terms?" The two of them stared at each other, and Ashley realized this was about more than just her situation. There was history here, power dynamics she didn't understand, territorial disputes that had nothing to do with David Morrison. "I'll do it," Ashley heard herself say. "I'll meet David, but I have conditions." All three turned to look at her. Andrew's expression was unreadable, but she thought she saw a flicker of approval in his eyes. "Go on," he said. "First, I want to know exactly where you'll be and how close. I want to know the plan in detail, not just the broad strokes." Ashley lifted her chin, channeling every ounce of courage she possessed. "Second, I want a guarantee, in writing, if that means anything in your world, that after this is done, I'm free. No more protection needed. No more looking over my shoulder. No more being part of this world. Done," Andrew said immediately. "Third," Ashley continued, her heart pounding, "I want 5 minutes alone with David before you move in. 5 minutes to talk to him, to ask my questions, to understand what really happened. I need that closure." "Absolutely not," Isabella said at the same time. Andrew said, "That's too dangerous." "Then I don't do it," Ashley said simply. "You said I'm a player now, not a piece. Players get to set their own terms. Those are mine." The silence that followed was heavy with tension. Isabella looked furious. Marcus remained unreadable, and Andrew seemed to be engaged in some internal calculation. Finally, Andrew nodded slowly. 2 minutes. Not 5. 2 minutes of conversation, and Marcus will be close enough to intervene if anything goes wrong. After that, we move in, and this ends. 3 minutes, Ashley countered. 2.5, that's my final offer. Ashley extended her hand. Deal. Andrew shook it, his grip warm and firm, but as he held her hand, he leaned in close and whispered, so only she could hear. "I don't know what David said to you, but whatever it was, remember that he's fighting for his survival. He'll say anything to get what he needs." Ashley pulled back, meeting his eyes. "So will anyone when they're desperate. Even you, Mr. Walker." Something flickered across Andrew's face. Surprise, respect, or maybe something else. But before he could respond, Ashley turned to Isabella. "When do we do this?" she asked. "We need to wait for David to make contact," Isabella said, her tone suggesting she wasn't entirely happy with how this had played out. "And when he does, we move fast. This is a one-time opportunity. If he suspects a trap, we'll never get another chance." Ashley nodded, her hand moving to the phone in her pocket where David's video message waited. The phone felt like it was burning through the fabric, a secret that grew heavier with each passing second. She should tell them, should show them the video, admit David had already made contact, set the trap for tomorrow night at the place where she and David had their first date, that little Italian restaurant in Brooklyn that was always too loud and too crowded, where they'd laughed over cheap wine and cheaper pasta. But something held her back. Maybe it was the last remnant of her feelings for David. Maybe it was doubt about Andrew's true motivations. Or maybe it was simply that for the first time in months Ashley had information that gave her power, and she wasn't ready to hand that power over to someone else. "I should rest," she said, suddenly desperate to be alone. "Dr. Chen said I need to keep my stress levels down." "Of course." Andrew gestured toward her room. "We'll work out the details and brief you tomorrow. Try to get some sleep." Ashley nodded and headed toward her room, feeling 3 sets of eyes on her back. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it, her heart hammering in her chest. She pulled out her phone and watched David's video again, studying his face for any sign of deception. Was he telling the truth? Was the pregnancy really unplanned? Were his feelings genuine? And more importantly, was she really considering meeting him alone, going against everything Andrew had advised, potentially walking into a trap of her own making? Ashley looked at her reflection in the darkened window. The woman staring back at her looked different from the scared waitress who'd fainted on the stairs just days ago. This woman looked harder, more calculating, more like someone who belonged in Andrew's world. The question was, did she want to belong there? Or was there still a chance at a different life, a simpler life, the life she'd thought she was building with David before everything fell apart? She had until tomorrow night to decide. Tomorrow night at 7 o'clock at that little Italian restaurant in Brooklyn, she'd either follow Andrew's plan and help trap David, or she'd show up alone and hear the full truth, whatever that might be. Ashley placed both hands on her belly, feeling the baby move inside her. "What do I do?" she whispered to the life growing there. "Who do I trust?" The baby kicked in response, a small flutter that could have meant anything or nothing. Outside her door, she heard Andrew and Isabella's voices raised in argument, though she couldn't make out the words. Marcus said something quiet and calming, the sounds of Andrew's world conducting its business, playing its games. Ashley closed her eyes and tried to imagine a different life, one where she'd never met David, never gotten pregnant, never fallen on those stairs into Andrew Walker's arms. Would she be happier? Safer? But that life was as unreachable as the stars outside her window. This was her reality now, caught between 2 men, each claiming to protect her, each with their own agenda. And somewhere in the middle, she had to find the truth and decide her own path. Tomorrow night would bring answers. Tomorrow night would change everything. Ashley just had to survive until then, and decide which side of the trap she wanted to be on when it snapped shut. Every choice has a price. Ashley was about to pay hers, or someone else would pay it for her. The hospital room was quiet except for the steady beep of monitors. Ashley lay against the pillows, one hand on her belly, feeling the reassuring movements of her baby. False alarm, that's what Dr. Chen had called it. Stress-induced contractions. The baby was fine. She was fine. But nothing else was. Andrew sat beside her bed, exhaustion etched into his features. He hadn't left since the ambulance brought her in. "You should have told me about David's video," he said quietly. "I know." Ashley met his eyes. "I needed to hear his side, to understand." "And did you understand?" Before Ashley could answer, there was a knock. A security guard entered. "Ms. Taylor, David Morrison is here. He's asking to see you." Ashley's breath caught. She looked at Andrew, whose jaw tightened. "Do you want him gone?" he asked. "No." Ashley straightened. "Let him in. But you stay, Andrew." David entered moments later, looking haggard and desperate. His eyes found Ashley immediately. "Are you okay? The baby?" "We're fine." Ashley gestured to a chair across from Andrew. "Sit." We're going to settle this. Right here. Right now. David sat reluctantly, the two men eyeing each other with barely contained tension. David, was the pregnancy planned? Ashley asked directly. No, I swear it wasn't. His voice cracked. It was an accident that made me want to change everything. But then my bosses wanted me to do something terrible and I panicked. I took the money and ran. Taking my savings too, Ashley said flatly. I know, I'm so sorry. Tears filled his eyes. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd pay you back. But I know that doesn't make it right. Andrew leaned forward. Where's the money now? Safe. And it stays that way until I know Ashley's protected. She is protected, Andrew said coldly. By me. Stop. Ashley's voice cut through their hostility. This isn't about who's the better protector. David, answer me this. If I asked you right now to return the money, turn yourself in, face the consequences, would you do it? For us? David went pale. Ashley, they'd hurt me. You're asking me to... I'm asking you to prove you care about us more than yourself. The silence was crushing. David looked trapped. And in that moment, Ashley saw the truth. He cared, but not enough. She turned to Andrew. And if I asked you to walk away? Let me handle this alone? Andrew held her gaze steadily. No, because you'd be in danger and I won't let that happen, even if you hate me for it. Ashley felt clarity settle over her. Then here's what happens. David returns the money. Andrew brokers a deal. Protection for me and the baby in exchange. And David, her voice softened but remained firm, you leave. No contact unless I decide otherwise. You'll know your child exists and is safe, but you have to earn the right to be part of their life. Ashley, please. David's voice broke. This is your chance to do the right thing, she said. What you do with it is up to you. David buried his face in his hands, shoulders shaking. Finally, he looked up. Okay, I'll return everything. Just, please don't shut me out completely. That depends on you, Ashley said gently. On whether you can become someone worthy of being called a father. She looked at Andrew. Can you arrange it? Peacefully? I'll make it happen, he promised. 6 weeks later, Ashley stood in her new apartment in Queens, modest, safe, and entirely hers. The nursery was ready, painted soft yellow with a crib Andrew had insisted on buying. She'd accepted his help, but maintained her boundaries. David was gone, disappeared to start over somewhere. One letter had arrived, an apology, a promise to change, and a photo of the ultrasound he'd kept. It was something. Andrew checked in weekly, always respectful of her space. His protection remained, invisible but present, just enough to let her breathe easy. As Ashley folded tiny baby clothes, she felt her daughter kick strongly. Yes, a daughter. She'd found out last week. A little girl who would grow up knowing her mother had survived an impossible situation and built something better from the ruins. The doorbell rang. Ashley opened it to find Andrew holding a wrapped package. For the baby, he said with a small smile. I hope that's okay. It's perfect. Ashley stepped aside. Would you like to come in? I just made tea. As they sat together in her small living room, talking quietly about nothing and everything, Ashley realized something profound. She'd learned to trust herself, to make hard choices, to build a life on her own terms. Some people entered your life like storms, changing everything before disappearing, but the strength you found in surviving, that stayed forever. And as Ashley felt her daughter move inside her, she knew that whatever came next, they would face it together, strong, independent, and finally free.